Hello, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the Arizona Foundation's Bridge Forum, One Team, Social Justice, Activism, and Sports. This forum is part 5 and an addition to the Foundation's Time for Change 2020 series, discussing systemic racism in America. This special segment includes leaders from various Arizona sports organizations to get their reaction to recent developments around social justice, activism, and sports. Our mission at the Arizona Foundation is to create and empower heroes in our communities. Today, we're at the beautiful Kempton Hotel, Palomar, Phoenix. Thank you to Jeremy Wilhite, General Manager of the Kempton Hotel, and his team for hosting us today. Welcome to all of you online, tuning into our live stream from across the nation. I'm Ron Williams, President of the Arizona Foundation and United States Air Force veteran. I'm honored to serve as Master of Ceremonies for this important forum today. We are very fortunate to have a sports subject matter expert with us today to moderate. Let's welcome ESPN host and CNN columnist, LZ Granderson. LZ, stand up. We also want to welcome back to Arizona a civil rights icon from Washington, D.C. to serve as our keynote speaker today. Who better to keynote than someone who truly experienced major racial injustices firsthand and has been on the forefront of social justice and civil rights, in the civil rights movement for his entire life, as an assistant to Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., and as a national director of the Million Man March. Please welcome back Dr. Benjamin Chavis, Jr. The 2020 series is hosted by the Arizona Foundation to understand different perspectives and beliefs about community policing and examine how communities can work together with police to create equality in our nation. However, today's Bridge Forum is specifically designed to have discussions about reactions by sports organizations locally and nationally to events occurring around the country. Today's panelists represent the top major sports organizations in the state of Arizona. We are truly honored that they have entrusted the Arizona Foundation with the privilege of hosting this important discussion. We will formally introduce our panelists for our moderated panel discussion later, but in short today, we are honored to have with us first Michael Bidwell, owner of the NFL's Arizona Cardinals, Javier Gutierrez, President and CEO of the National Hockey League's Arizona Coyotes, Mr. Jason Rowley, President and CEO of the NBA's Phoenix Suns and WNBA's Phoenix Mercury. We also have Julie Giese, President of Phoenix Raceway, associated with NASCAR. We also have Joe Walsh, Vice President of People and Culture of Major League Baseball's Arizona Diamondbacks. And finally, we have Ray Anderson, Athletic Director at Arizona State University. Let's please welcome our panelists to the forum. Our PR firm, Evolve Public Relations and Marketing, informed us that the total potential audience for this event is 5.7 million people. So we know today's topic and discussion is important. To our distinguished panelists, we can't thank you enough for taking the time to join us today to share your voice. The Arizona Foundation believes that we all have a shared sense of duty to do our part. Our mantra in this series is, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. So today, we're going to face it. In addition to the police chiefs and mayors and other elected officials that have joined us today, I want to give a big thanks to everyone who supports the Arizona Foundation and the work we do. Today's sponsors and supporters include Maricopa County, represented by County Supervisor Bill Gates, District 3, Greater Phoenix Leadership, represented by President and CEO Neil Giuliano, the Greater Phoenix Economic Council, represented by President and CEO Chris Camacho, the Arizona Chamber of Commerce and Industry, represented by Glenn Hammer, the Kempton Hotel, Palomar, Phoenix, represented by General Manager Jeremy Wilhite, and Mint Social, represented by CEO Matt O'Brien, and Golden Rule Live, represented by owner Heath McCarter. We also want to thank our PR firm, Evolve Public Relations and Marketing, and our production partners, SWAT HD. Last but not least, the Arizona Foundation Board of Directors represented here today. Our co-founders, Alan A.P. Powell and Aaron Baer, board members Heath McCarter, Dennis Prince, Rashandra Carnes, Matt O'Brien, and myself. And I'd be remiss if I didn't give a special thanks to Scottsdale Police Chief Alan Rodbell and Scottsdale Mayor Jim Lane. Their behind-the-scenes support has been invaluable to us throughout this entire series. So thank you. And let's please give our sponsors and supporters a big round of applause. Thank you. And now for our opening remarks is our co-founder, Aaron Bear. Along with Alan A.P. Powell, they created the Arizona Foundation and are the vision behind today's forum. He's a strategy and innovative consultant and a serial entrepreneur. He has a vast background in the tech industry. He holds an MBA in global management from Thunderbird School of Global Management, a master's degree in economic development from Indiana University, and a bachelor's degree in international business. It is with great honor I introduce our co-founder, Mr. Aaron Bear.
Thanks, everybody, for coming to this important conversation. AP and I actually started the Bridge Forum over 5 years ago in this room. And it was at a time when Ferguson and Baltimore erupted onto the national scene. And actually, at a Denny's not far from here, AP, myself, Marshall Franklin at the time, she was the head of community and law enforcement, and General Spider Marks, who was the head of the criminal justice school at the University of Phoenix at the time, got together and had a conversation of how we could have a conversation or have a difficult conversation between the community and law enforcement here so that we don't have events like happened in Baltimore. From that, we've obviously expanded that dialogue and that communication. And now I believe have over a dozen plus bridges and 5 this year. Today, we're going to focus on sports activism and the importance of how professional and college sports can play a role in this conversation, and look forward to all the panelists in the remarks of that. You know, we want to challenge, I think, this opportunity for the NBA, the NFL, Major League Baseball, the NHL, NASCAR, and NCAA to have conversations and to engage in that conversation. And I think that's why all of our fine panelists have shown up here today, because they are engaging to create equitable and fair outcomes. With that, the Arizona Foundation and the Bridge Forum in particular, we see this Bridge Forum expanding, you know, beyond just this dialogue, but to really drive into systemic racism and issues such as mental health, education, youth leadership, entrepreneurship, employment, and more. All issues that Arizona has taken on in our 10-plus year history, and our board of directors has been dedicated to solving. But we want to appreciate our panelists for showing up, our moderator, our host, Ron, has obviously stepped up and done a great job hosting the last several of these. Moderator, thank you, Dr. Ben-Chavis, for actually making the trip out here so often to help us facilitate this conversation. And LZ, thank you for joining us here today. We hope that everybody can engage in this conversation, but what's more important is that we start taking actions to this conversation. And I think that's our next step in this, as we're working with the Maricopa County supervisors to create an ongoing program for community action and actually advisory boards that we actually drive some of the changes that are mentioned in these programs into the community for lasting, impactful change. So thank you for everybody being here, and please enjoy the conversation. Thanks.
Thank you, Aaron. Next on our agenda, we'll have our invocation, followed by the singing of the national anthem, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. As you stand for the singing of the national anthem, please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Now, for our invocation, he's the senior pastor of First Institutional Baptist Church of Phoenix. He was recognized by the Arizona Republic newspaper as one of the 10 most influential religious leaders in the Valley, and awarded the MLK Calvin C. Good Lifetime Achievement Award by the City of Phoenix Human Relations Commission, amongst many more. Please join me in welcoming to the podium the senior pastor of First Institutional Baptist Church and chairman of the Arizona African American Clergy Coalition, Dr. Warren H. Stewart, Sr.
Let us pray. God, we thank you for the breath that we breathe. We thank you for being the awesome creator of the human body, mind, soul, and spirit. And as we are here dealing with social activism in sports, we still marvel at how the human being that you created continues to produce, continues to break records, continues to endure, and show us what it is to be champions. We thank you for all of these major professional sports owners and executives and representatives. You have given them the privilege of being stewards, managers of thousands of human beings, male and female, who are pushed with the desire for victory and win. Thank you for allowing them to be good stewards over them. And we thank you for the billions of dollars in resources that comes through playing games, being involved in competitive sports. We thank you for the Bridge Forum, AP and Allen, as they continue after 5 years, starting in the midst of the uprising of Ferguson, Missouri, and Michael Brown's killing. We thank you that they have not given up. They have kept the faith. Thank you that they have brought together a gathering of leaders like never before. So we thank you. So be with each of the speakers. God, we come in a time of crisis. Here we are again, dealing with systemic racism, dealing with injurious and fatal interaction with police and the community. God, how can we stop having forums and not change things? And we pray that the change will come. The seeds will be planted for change by these men and women who are gathered here today, that there will not be a period at the end of this forum, but there will be ellipsis, meaning that there's more to come. Thank you for our guest speaker from Washington, D.C., his heralded history of being a freedom fighter. We pray for all of those who have been hurt and injured by systemic racism that injures and or kills more people daily than cancer, heart disease, all other diseases, and COVID-19 combined. So God, be with us today. And I pray this prayer in the name of the undisputable GOAT, Jesus Christ superstar, that curly-haired, brown-skinned Palestinian Jew who, as a young adult, changed this world forever. In his name do I pray. Amen.
Thank you so much, Pastor Stewart, for your powerful and meaningful invocation. Please stand. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare the bombs bursting in air gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. Next on our agenda, we have Mr. Harold Branch III. We call him HB. His life story was featured in an MTV documentary. He is the founder of one of the country's largest open mic poetry events called Home-Based Poetry. He's a speaker, trainer, entrepreneur, and poet, and a proud Phoenix resident. We can't thank him enough for taking the time to join us again to share his amazing talents today. Yes, he's a poet, but he does so much more for our community. Being a doctoral student, I'm looking forward to the day I call him Dr. HB. To share a piece he wrote back in 1999, over 20 years ago, I Can't Breathe. Please welcome back Harold Branch III. Thank you.
Good morning. As it was said, I wrote this poem when I was 19, over 20 years ago, as a student activist and poet here at Arizona State University. And being here is so bittersweet. It's bitter because it's still relevant. Didn't have to change a word. And has more impact than it ever had before. But it's sweet because people are listening. And that gives some hope because we're still working on it and we're still having the conversations. So words mean something, and it's a poet's job to just be honest. And it's your job to receive it. Deal? Everybody's scared to talk. I can't breathe. The bow of racism is constricting me, preventing me from living to my full potential, convicting me on premises that are inconsequential, like my vehicle. Being mental is fundamental for surviving. You got to be complex because the simple ones are dying, relying on sex and drugs to get them to the next step until they become the victim of disease and a loss of breath. I can't breathe. The asthma of police got me gasping. All I have to do is exist, and they're harassing, laughing, asking me questions with disrespect as if they want a negative reaction so they can have an excuse to blast in my chest. With bullets my taxes paid for. Grateful when they pass me and don't harass me like they did me a favor. So I attempt to put my head back and relax in this minute victory savor. Because these officers got me looking for air, huffing and puffing. As if I was in labor. I can't breathe. But my heart bleeds like a blind man without braille and a need to read. I fail to believe that I'll be respected for my color or my creed. Some don't see that I breathe for my mother and my seed. Survival is my lover, and we just had a daughter named Succeed. Similar to the leaves, I wonder where this breeze will lead me. The sun sees me as the wind breathes me and exhales destiny. I surrender my mind to the right hand of God and give his left the rest of me. But some still attempt to unrightfully arrest my respiratory, squeeze my lungs empty and suffocate the spirits with me. Make the air thick with oppression so inhalation is impossible. Put us in foul situations and make explanations unimaginable. We got a gun obsessions and unprotected sex is casual. We love money, but our study habits are less than admirable. Actually, like landing airplanes, we're on a gradual descension. America, we're our own competition, and we're losing. Constantly choosing decisions that will hurt me and lead to our mental, spiritual, and ultimately physical death, as if Jackie Joyner Kersey was escaping my lungs. I'm running out of breath. I feel like the sun rise because I'm always mourning, crying for my brothers and sisters because America seems like we stopped growing. Like a backwards river or a letter written from right to left, we're flowing the wrong way. And as a result, my blood flow is slowing. All the knowledge I previously had, I'm no longer knowing. My chest is tightening, my veins are showing, and as multifaceted death is coming, my motivation for living is going. As a complete being, my internal systems no longer have what they need. Somebody hurry and help me, cuz I can't breathe. Thank you.
Thank you again, HB. Soon to be Dr. HB. Thanks for coming and sharing with us 20 years ago. All right. I get the great pleasure to introduce our first special guest speaker from the City of Phoenix District 8, Carlos Garcia. Carlos has spent the last 16 years of his life fighting for social justice in Arizona. Born in Mexico, he migrated to the United States at the age of 5 and was raised by his mother as a single parent. Carlos studied to be a history teacher, but his path has led him to be a community organizer his entire adult life. Carlos is married to his partner, Alexis, a teacher and union leader. They have 2 children, Chimal and Yaretsi. Please join me in welcoming from District 8, Phoenix City Councilman Carlos Garcia.
Good morning. Still taking that in. I think first thing I want to say is I'm glad to hear the word systemic racism and to acknowledge that that's why we're here. We're here because of systemic racism and police brutality. Not here to debate whether activism belongs in sports or not, whether BLM is this or that. We're here to actually talk about the issues that brought us here today. I also want to make clear that this issue is not just in Minneapolis, Kenosha, or Louisville. It's in our own backyard, here in Phoenix, here in Arizona. We have our own George, our own Brianna, go by the names of Muhammad, James, Michelle, Romaine, Dion. These are our community members. These are the folks that some of us and some of you in the room have been fighting for the last 30 years. Systemic racism and the privilege and what some of us up here and some of us in the room have gained from is something we have to acknowledge. We have to sit in that discomfort and talk about how to move forward from there. About a month ago, we were having a conversation about the Diamondbacks and what needed to be done to be able to make sure that that field was redone so that the Diamondbacks could stay here. And in that conversation, someone that was bringing it up to me said, we need baseball. Baseball has gotten us through a lot of things. And they mentioned we wouldn't have healed from 9/11 without baseball. And I reflected on that. And I thought, why is it that a sport was given that much credit? That something so tragic, so huge was able to move us forward? And I don't want to say that it was easy, After 9/11, a lot of folks suffered with the response. But Americans were willing to give up their own civil liberties. The way we travel shifted. The Patriot Act. Some Arab, Muslim, Middle Eastern Americans have suffered since. But there is somewhat of an easy way out. We could all come together and say it was the other. They're terrorists, they're foreigners, they're hurting us. And we were able to come together and figure out solutions. Support the troops, support first responders, support the families that were hurt by 9/11. This is different. And I say this is different because the other is us. That systematic racism and what we're fighting is within us. And so we need to sit with that. We need to figure out, since the beautiful work of the civil rights movement, and it's an honor to be in your presence, Dr. Shaven, this country has decided to declare war on honest hills, war on poverty, war on crime, war on terror. We can't do that with this. We have trained ourselves from the inception of this country to lean and depend on white supremacy for its existence. You combine the foundation of this country and the way or the reason it was able to become what it was, which was slavery and the genocide of indigenous people, with that long history from Jim Crow to what we're seeing today. We need to be truthful. We need to recognize what we've gained from that. And for athletes, there's no longer a time for them to sit on the sidelines. We had John Carlos, Tommy Smith. We had our very own adopted son, Muhammad Ali. All the way up to Kaepernick, who was shunned for what he did. Those used to be outliers. And what we've seen in the last couple of months, and for those of us fighting for social justice, it's a breath of fresh air. It is now the norm. You see Black Lives Matter plastered on the NBA basketball court. You see the back of the jersey say justice, say vote, say their names. So we are in a different time. And I want to leave you with this. There is a lot of work we could do. In the city of Phoenix, for over 30 years, we've been fighting for a civilian review board. It happened this year. An Office of Accountability and Transparency is now there. We need to make sure they're implemented and they work. And for those of y'all on the panel, I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say, but I invite you to sit in that uncomfortableness of the privileges you've gained because of the discrimination that people have suffered. Take risks. Give to places that may be uncomfortable. Meet the families. Understand the problem and its roots. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Arizona. I think together we're going to be able to get out of this. So thank you all so much for having me.
Thank you, Councilman Garcia. Thank you so much. Our next special guest speaker is Maricopa County Supervisor, District 3, Bill Gates. Bill served on the Phoenix City Council representing District 3 from June 2009 through May 2016. Supervisor Gates was represented on District 3 as the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors since 2017 and was elected chairman of the board by his colleagues in 2019. He received his bachelor's degree from Drake University in political science and graduated from Harvard Law School. Please join me in welcoming Supervisor Bill Gates.
Good morning, everyone. I'm truly humbled to be here today and to speak after the incredible people we've just heard from. But first of all, I want to thank Arizona, and I want to thank my good friend AP Powell for bringing us all together to have this, as Councilmember Garcia put it, uncomfortable but extremely important discussion. And as I look at Pastor Stewart, thank you for your leadership over the years for bringing us a Martin Luther King holiday here in Arizona and all that you do for us every day. As was mentioned, I do represent actually most of the city of Phoenix on the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors, and before that, District 3 on the Phoenix City Council, which includes Moon Valley, Sunny Slope, and Northeast Phoenix. And over the years, I've been in many public meetings, as you can imagine. And many people have come before us on these bodies I sat on and spoke to us about discrimination. And I listened. And they came to us and they spoke about systemic racism in law enforcement. And I listened. But I didn't really hear. And I didn't ask the questions that I should have asked. But that all changed for me when I saw the video of George Floyd. I recognized that it wasn't enough just to listen. I had to hear. I had to engage in conversations and learn to help us move forward and to have real change. In the last moments of his life, George Floyd begged for air.
Yes, sir.
But former police officer Chauvin, he didn't listen. And as a result, George Floyd died. But now we must listen. We must hear, and we must move forward towards change. I am thrilled to be standing up here on this dais with the leaders of Arizona's 4 major professional teams, as well as NASCAR, as well as Arizona State University. Because sports has a special place in my heart, and sports has a special place in America's heart. And as we're sitting here right now and we're mourning George Floyd, we're mourning countless others, and now as a nation we're shocked by what has happened to Jacob Blake. This is an amazing time for our country because sports has become the forum for social change. And that's an incredible and important role that sports is playing. But as Councilmember Garcia mentioned, sports is also a place to bring us together, to unify us, just like it did during September 11th. And I have confidence that at this important time in our history, sports can bring us together on the issue of social justice. It's already happening in Maricopa County. The Suns and the Coyotes have stepped up and partnered with Maricopa County. They're opening up Veterans Memorial Coliseum and the Gila River Arena as voting centers in this extremely important election that we have in November. And the Diamondbacks have worked with their players and they have encouraged them to speak out on issues of social justice. And how about the Cardinals? Mr. Bidwell and the Cardinals players have led important discussions on criminal justice reform. And of course, Arizona State University, they've opened up and organized Zoom meetings with their student athletes, encouraged them to have honest discussions about how to bring real change. But not only that, Arizona State has empowered their student athletes to express themselves through art and other means, including an important piece commemorating the holiday of Juneteenth. There's so much going on in Maricopa County already. We have much to do, but I'm proud to see what has happened already. But I'm excited about today. I'm going to be listening very closely. I want to hear this dialogue. I want to learn from it, and I want to help be a part of moving forward with that change that we need. If we can do that, if we can have a true civil dialogue on racism here in Phoenix, the 5th largest city in the country, in Maricopa County, the 4th largest county in the country, we can start to heal. But more than that, we can serve as a model for the rest of the country. When George Floyd begged for air, Chauvin refused to listen. But now our country is gasping for air. And we must listen. We must hear. We must take action because we must change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Supervisor Gates. Now, our keynote speaker has a compelling story. Dr. Benjamin Chavis Jr. in his youth was an assistant to Dr. Martin Luther King, who inspired his lifelong work in the civil rights movement. At the age of 23, Chavis rose to international prominence in 1971 as a leader of the Wilmington 10, civil rights activists who were convicted of committing arson. Their convictions were subsequently overturned in 1980, and all 10 were freed due to prosecutorial misconduct. The case of the Wilmington 10 was condemned internationally as a political prosecution. He was the national director of the Million Man March and is currently president and CEO of the National Newspaper Publishers Association. Joining us from Washington, D.C., please join me in welcoming the national icon, Dr. Ben Chavis, Jr.
Good morning. Reverend Stewart, I feel like this is revival time. Thank you for your prayer. Can I get an amen to the prayer? Amen. And all the other speakers, Brother Collis, the other official from the city. We now know that this is not only an important gathering. I know AZ is going to do a great job as moderator. I watch you all the time on CNN, man. You do a great job. And I know you'll do a great job. I bring you greetings this morning from the National Newspaper Publishers Association. I represent the Black Press of America. We have about 230 African-American-owned newspapers across the United States, including the Arizona Informer here in Phoenix. But I also come today as a 60-plus year veteran of the civil rights movement. And this is my 5th trip to Phoenix in the last 2 months. Why? Because one of my colleagues, somebody I respect, A.P. Powell, and Ron and Aaron and others put together the Arizona Foundation. I see something in this city, and I know that this is being broadcast live, so our words today are not only for Phoenix and not only for Arizona, but for our nation and world. Because through social media, we're able to allow people not only to hear us, see us, but as my hip-hop colleagues would say, feel us. We need to feel your poem, HP. We need to not only hear those last words of George Floyd, or even more recently now, the words of Jacob Blake from his hospital bed, speaking. And many will say, well, how can this man speak about unity? How can this man speak about equality after being shot 7 times in the back, paralyzed from the waist down? And, of course, yesterday I was on the radio station with AP, and our brother, who was a Marine vet, hosting the show, asked me, he said, Dr. Chavis, what are you doing with the rage and the anger? I said, that's a very good question. Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., in my early years, formative years, I was an assistant to Dr. King, 14-year-old. He would tell all of the staff, because we would be in situations where dogs would turn loose on us, we were sped on, we were tear gassed. I'm 72 years old, I can still smell their tear gas. But Dr. King would tell us, bitterness only distorts the beholder. I agree, we need to unpack this term, systemic racism. So I'm a preacher, y'all. I haven't even got to my notes yet. But I feel the audience. I feel the congregation. And I know there are a lot of particularly millennials watching this right now from across the country. I was getting texts from New York, from Washington, from Los Angeles, from Wisconsin, Breonna Taylor, AP, from Kentucky. The whole nation is watching this morning. This is the 9th month of 2020. Different time zones. It's already 11 o'clock back east. It's after 8 here. We're addressing sports and social justice. So I'm going to go ahead now and get into my introduction. I know I'm a keynote speaker, and I have 10 minutes, so Ron, you make sure I don't go over time. The issue of social justice for me, given my 60-year-plus career in the civil rights movement in the United States, is an issue that goes to the heart of what makes our nation have a chance to continue to evolve toward a more perfect union, even in the face of the realities of systemic racism and racial injustice. You know, people make up the system. A lot of times when we talk about systemic racism, we think that's something that has to be dismantled brick by brick, or wall by wall, or law by law, or regulation by regulation, or institution by institution, or team by team. It's a little bit more deeper than that. Racism goes beyond racial prejudice. You have to have the power to institutionalize your prejudice and make people suffer because of your prejudice. So prejudice is part of it, it's not all of it. And so when you hear our outcry, when you hear brothers and sisters not only wear the Black Lives Matter T-shirt or hat or chant Black Lives Matter, it is about black people, but it's not just about black people. It's about Latino. It's about Asian. It's about Native American. It's about white people. It's about all people. But if we feel uncomfortable with saying Black Lives Matter, then that gives us insight to how deep this problem is. A recent study came out, Reverend Stewart, that in 2020, millennials, young people, Generation X, Generation Y, Generation Z, are less prejudiced than their parents or their grandparents. And I think that's reason for hope. The truth of the matter is, if you watch all of the demonstrations all over America today, there are more white people carrying Black Lives Matter signs than black people. That's a good thing. Isn't it by time that we should all find a way to unite, not just around a phrase, but around a movement for change? Because if the problem is systemic racism, then we need solutions that are also systemic. You can't solve a complex problem with a simplified solution. We need a complex and a systematic solution to the problem of systemic racism in America. And I'm so pleased to be on this panel with the leaders of professional and owners of professional and presidents and CEOs of professional sports and college sports. Because it just may be that sports may be that one part of our society that can help us to look a little deeper into this subject matter and make some changes. 4 years ago, when San Francisco 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick took a knee to protest the incidents of police brutality on black people across the nation, he was vilified and ostracized. Some misinterpreted what Kaepernick did as an insult to the American flag, but that was not the case at all. What Kaepernick did was, in fact, squarely in the long tradition of professional athletes, sports athletes, such as Joe Louis, Jesse Owens, Jackie Robinson, Hank Aaron, John Collis and Thomas Smith, Muhammad Ali, and many, many others. When we all just stood and pledged allegiance to the flag. I started to kneel, but I said, no, I'm going to pledge allegiance. Because at some point, it's not what we do separately, it's what we do together. It's what we do together across the lines of race, across the line of ethnicity, across the lines of language, across the lines of geography. And don't think now that America only has the race problem. It's a global problem. But America has a chance, being the leading country in wealth, the leading country in science, the leading country in technology, the leading country in so much. Why are we so backward when it comes to race? Why are we so hesitant? Why are we so resistant to making the changes that will prevent other victims? I'm so pleased that our police chiefs are here. I really like the police chief of Scottsdale. He's a good man. I had dinner with the police chief of Scottsdale and the mayor of Scottsdale. It's better to have dinner with the police than be chased by the police. The point I'm trying to make is that, I got 5 minutes. Well, let me move on. The point I'm trying to make is that I do believe, AZ, we have an opportunity as well as a responsibility, not only to have this dialogue, but as I was saying at the beginning, something about Arizona. It's a beautiful state, ecologically. But you know, Carlos, what I think makes Arizona even more beautiful is the diversity of its people. This is your strength here. We're not having this discussion in my home state of North Carolina. We're not having this discussion in California. We're not having this discussion in New York. We're not having this discussion in Mississippi or in Florida. We're having this discussion in Arizona. And I want to thank each of you personally for having the courage not just to sit on this panel and, quote unquote, be uncomfortable, but to sit on this panel and help give voice, help give vision, help give some vitality to what we need to do together to come up with solutions, not only in the arena of sports, but also in the larger society. I thank God for our athletes who put their own careers at risk to say that we have to take a stand. We just can't say what happened to George Floyd was wrong, or what happened to Breonna Taylor was wrong, or what happened to Blake is wrong, or what happened to Eric Garner is wrong. The list is long, Pastor. We have to say, yes, it was wrong, but we have to say we have to work now to make sure that these wrongs don't continue. We have to make sure that we get the system of racism, the system of racial hatred, the system of racial prejudice out of our being, out of our soul, out of our spirit. This is our calling. When you see that competitive spirit of athletes that we all admire, that's a great thing. I wish we had that competitive spirit, AP, to make our society celebrate its diversity and its inclusion, make our society be joyful at the panoply, not just of racial difference, because as my brother's prayer for us said, we're all part of one human family. We just got to rediscover how to be humans to one another, brothers to one another, sisters to one another. Our brothers keep us to one another. Our sisters keep us to one another. That's our charge. Whether we're on the court, whether we're on the field, or whether we're on the street, or whether we're in the community. That's our charge. We got work to do. And, you know, I believe that this panel AZ is going to extract some of the things that we need to do. What is our call to action from this forum? How are we going to work together? I can pledge to you that the Black press of America, we're going to help challenge these issues. When I say the Black press, I'm not just talking about Black people reading Black newspapers. I'm talking about all people reading what we publish, what we distribute. Because we do live in a media-impacted society. One of the points I just wanted to close with, and of course I see my colleagues saying, well, Ben, you haven't told one of your stories. I'm going to tell one story before I sit down that's relevant to what we are discussing. But as a media person, I am concerned that the media also seems to have a fixation on negative news. We seem to have a fixation on the wrongs of society. But I also want to have a fixation on the right. What are we doing right? Not just what we're doing wrong. And if some of our athletes are now pointing to how to do right, we need to celebrate that, not vilify athletes because they stand up. And I'm glad that the owners are standing with their teams. I've seen some owners kneel with their teams. Not in disrespect. The ultimate patriot is the one who speaks out when the nation does wrong. That's true patriotism, AP. I want to salute this fact. My father was a veteran of World War I when the military was segregated. But because the military was segregated, that doesn't mean that black men didn't go fight for this nation. And as I recall, my father was reluctant to tell me the stories of World War I, and I know why. Because even though he was injured, the hospital ship that they brought him back on was also segregated. The German prisoners that they had more place on the ship than the American soldiers who took the German prisoners. But yet he came back and saluted that flag, put on his American Legion uniform, became scoutmaster. I was a Boy Scout, Club Scout, brought up in the Scouts, pledging allegiance to the flag all my life. Very proud of it. I'm proud that they allowed me at 14 to start working with Dr. King. My parents pushed me into the civil rights movement. They weren't reluctant, and I thank them for it. My last point, and I know I'm out of time, is this. The Wilmington 10 case, I don't have time to go into it, but it was a case about school desegregation. It's about whether or not black and white children could go to school together. You know, it was in 1954 that the Brown decision declared, Supreme Court decision, that separate and unequal schools were unconstitutional. It was in 1954. But by 1970, the schools in my home state of North Carolina were still segregated. So at the time, I was sent by my church, the United Church of Christ of Wilmington, to organize, this is in 1971, a white supremacist group, paramilitary white supremacist group, attacked the church that we were in, Reverend Stewart. We were the victims of the violence, but the state indicted us for protesting. We were sentenced to 282 years in prison. Now, what is the connection of this story to what we're discussing this morning? Simply this. One of the junior high school students that we were fighting to get the right to go to New Hanover High School was Michael Jordan. We wanted to make sure his father would organize little league teams in basketball and baseball and football. They wouldn't allow us on the local school field, so we had our own, we made our own fields. In my hometown of Oxford, my parents donated something, we had something called Chavers Park. That's where I learned how to play baseball. That's also where I learned how to cuss. Because as a youngster, I wanted to hear what young people were saying. And I ask you today, what do your children hear you talk about? What do your children hear your expressions of your values? How do you value diversity and inclusion in your household? Because what your children witness at a very young age helps shapes their mind. And Carlos, that's where systemic racism starts. It doesn't start in the pillows of the corporate suites. It starts in our own households. Prejudice, ill feeling, someone's dress, someone's hair, someone's skin complexion. So Michael Jordan was able to get into New Hanover High School, became a pretty good basketball player, got into UNC, became a pretty good basketball player, went to Chicago Bulls, became a pretty good basketball player. And some would say he was still one of the greatest who's ever bounced that basketball. But if we hadn't done what we did in Wilmington, he would have never had a chance to go to school. Let us make more doors open. We've had enough tragedies. We had enough shock treatment. It's time for us to heal America. America will not be healed from outside of its shores. It's going to be healed at home. And who are the healers? I'm looking at them. I'm speaking to them. The healers are listening. Let's work together. Let's heal our nation. Then America will truly be great again.
Well, all right. What a keynote, Dr. Benjamin Chavis, Jr. All right, now to our panel of distinguished sports leaders. All of our panelists have deep and impressive bios, so in the interest of time, we're going to skip all that great information. Their information is online. I wanted to share a little bit, but we're going to move on. First, we'd like to introduce again Mr. Michael Bidwill, owner, National Football League's Arizona Cardinals. Let's give him a round of applause. Next, we have Javier Gutierrez, President and CEO of the Arizona Coyotes. Mr. Jason Rowley, Navy veteran, President and CEO of NBA's Phoenix Suns and WNBA's Phoenix Mercury. Next, we have Julie Giese, President, Phoenix Raceway, associated with NASCAR. Let's give her a round of applause. Mr. Derek Hall was supposed to be with us, couldn't be with us today, but he is well represented by Mr. Joe Walsh, Vice President of People and Culture. Let's give him a round of applause, Arizona Diamondbacks. And finally, we have Mr. Ray Anderson, the Athletic Director at Arizona State University. Let's welcome him. Now, we introduce our moderator. We're honored to have a subject matter expert in the sports industry. LZ Grandison is an American journalist and former actor. He is currently co-host of ESPN LA 710 and columnist for CNN. Great background, great bio, but let's move it forward. We're just happy to have him here. He's a Scottsdale resident that splits most of his time between living in Scottsdale and working in LA. Please join me in welcoming our moderator, LZ Grandison.
Morning. We're all going to need some elbow pads pretty soon with all the bumping and stuff wearing out on our jackets. Before I begin, and I really want to spend the entire time focusing on what the panel has to say, but I just want to share a brief story about Full Circle. I'm here today because of Mr. Chavis. He doesn't know that yet. But when I was a sophomore in college, I was still pretty lost. Wasn't quite sure what I was going to major in, what I was going to be when I grew up. I knew I had to go to college, I just didn't know why. And I was part of an organization on my university campus, African American Studies Support Group, and there was an event that we had learned about and was very excited about. And we were poor kids in college, didn't know how we were going to get to Washington, D.C., but we had the bright idea of marching into our president's office and demand that we got a university van to drive to Washington, D.C. That event, of course, was the Million Man March. That event changed my life. It gave me focus, helped me find a purpose. If you don't like what I have to say, either on TV or standing right here today, you can blame that man. Because of his organization with that march 20 plus years ago, 25 years ago, thank you, sir. It helped me and many of my friends and many people that we may not even recognize find purpose. So thank you again, sir. We're going to be uncomfortable, but we're not going to be mean-spirited. I don't believe that anything comes good out of being mean-spirited to each other, not even the conversation when it comes to race. The first question goes to the entire panel, but I'm going to start with Mr. Bidwell, Michael, because this pertains directly to your sport and Colin Kaepernick. What was your organization's understanding of his protest 4 years ago when you started it, and where does the organization start with it today?
Well, our understanding at the time was what he said, which is he was protesting against police brutality and specific crimes that had happened by police officers against black men. And today, where we are, I think, across the league, every owner and our commissioner has said we're going to support our players on this. We're going to not only support them, but we're going to roll up our sleeves and get very involved. So we're funding programs off the field, and all of us are having very important conversations and have had very important conversations for years with our locker rooms, with our staffs, and talking about what things that we can get involved in our communities across the board on this subject.
Why do you believe Colin Kaepernick's camp has yet to receive a phone call from any NFL team?
I don't. I think he has received a couple of phone calls.
Well, according to his agent, he hasn't.
Okay. I don't know, and I can't answer that question other than I think obviously where we are is we've got a quarterback and we're very happy with Kyler, but I can't answer for other owners.
Well, let's continue down the line the same question in terms of where was your organization's perspective on the protest when it began 4 years ago, and where are you today?
So, Javier Gutierrez, I've been in Arizona for 97 days. I've been in this role that amount of time. I have to start, if you don't mind, personal privilege here. I woke up this morning because my son is going to start the 7th grade, and that's what my focus was. And then I walked into this room and I heard these incredibly powerful voices, and I'm inspired. I'm honored to be here. It is not lost on me that I am the first Latino CEO in an incredibly not diverse sport, working alongside the first Latino owner in a not diverse sport. And it's also not lost on me that the dialogue that we have as an organization is all about inclusiveness and opportunity. And it's not just a dialogue, it's action. I really want to applaud every person on this panel because I think, as was said earlier, these are uncomfortable dialogues, and you can focus on the outrage or you can focus on how to outwork this issue. And I think that's what we're trying to do. To specifically answer your question, I don't know. I don't know what the reaction was, not only of the Coyotes, but of the NHL. But I can tell you where we are today. As I sit here, the NHL last week announced an incredibly comprehensive program to take action around the issue of systemic racism and inclusivity. We ourselves, this is core. Truth be told, I had a 20-year-plus career in investment and finance, having worked most recently at one of the largest diverse-owned investment management companies in the country, and yet this dialogue today is why I took this opportunity to take this role on, because sports is a voice. Sports does have a platform. We can stand up here and say we want to convene, we want to engage, we want to lead, we want to invest, and it will make a difference. And so what you hear from me is that we are taking on those uncomfortable conversations, and we're taking action. I saw something this weekend where you saw Kirk Herbstreit on College Game Day. I'm not sure if you all saw this, but after speaking with David Shaw, the head coach of Stanford, which is one of my alma maters, he quoted Benjamin Franklin. And that quote is incredibly powerful, and I first heard it as an undergrad in college. And it said, "Justice is not served until those who are unaffected by it are as outraged as those that are." And what you're seeing today is outrage, and you're seeing also action. And so I applaud Arizona for taking this action, bringing us together. And I agree with you, Dr. Chavis. I just came from Los Angeles, right? And this conversation's happening here. And this action's happening here. And I'm very proud to be here as part of this community.
To add to that, I think it's appropriate for Arizona and for the Phoenix market and the Valley that the first Latino CEO and president and first Latino owner in the NHL is here. I think that's representative and clear about the way people in this community accept others. And so I think that's just a terrific thing to see. Relative to the question, the specific question, our organization, Phoenix Suns, Phoenix Mercury, we have a history of being progressive on social issues. So at the time, we had an expectation that our players, our coaches, our staff would be supportive. And at the end of the day, the level of activism and protesting that you saw at the time didn't even remotely reflect what it is today. But the commitment for our organization to be supportive was certainly there. I think many, and I've referenced this before, many who have been in the market for a long time remember the position our organization took against SB 1070, which was basically nothing more than a racial profiling legislation, legally permissible racial profiling. Our organization at the time took a very strong stance against that. And look, at the end of the day, we're just like everybody else up in this panel, we're a business. And when you take strong positions on issues, particularly ones that draw strong emotions and strong reactions, you're gonna take some incoming from, whether it be from corporate sponsors, from fans, and the decision at the time, and the decision at the same time when Colin Kaepernick decided to go and take the position he was going to take was that we're going to be supportive of that. And if there's a negative consequence to our business, so be it. And that's the same position we're taking right now.
Julie, I just want to tweak your question just a little bit because obviously you have your own Colin Kaepernick and Bubba Watson. Can you talk a little bit about his impact on your sport?
Absolutely, and appreciate the opportunity to be here this morning. Bubba Wallace's message and his vision for our sport is the same as NASCAR's, and that is we want to create and continue to provide an experience that's inclusive and welcoming to everyone that has a passion for racing. I think for us, we're incredibly proud of Bubba and his courage and his strength over the past several months, and also of our entire industry for standing up and for rallying behind Bubba as well. He's a tremendous ambassador for our sport. He's a leader. He's opening doors, and he's welcoming people to our sport for the very first time, new fans, celebrities, other athletes. And we want to keep moving forward with that welcoming environment, and with Bubba championing that message for us. It's going to take NASCAR to new audiences, people that might not have thought NASCAR was for them in the past, and continue to open those doors.
Julie, from your perspective, why do you think it took this long to address the issue of the Confederate flag in the raceway, since that had been an ongoing conversation for a number of years?
You're right, it has been an ongoing conversation, and that was an important first step for us. And as far as how long it took, I can't really speak to that. We're really proud of the fact that we have moved forward with that. That is not allowed at our events moving forward, and it's being enforced at the events we've already had. And that was a step. That was the first step. And as we all said, this is a journey. This isn't a destination for us. So we're going to continue to use that as the first step into doing even more things like that.
Joe, same question in regards to your perspective with Kaepernick, where this protest began, and your perspective on it today.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for all that have gone before me. My answer will be similar, but I'll start with I wish I could see everyone's face, because the smile, the pride, the tears that I'm holding back and feeling after hearing some of these words is powerful. This room is powerful, and I'm grateful to be here. And I thank our managing general partner, Ken Kendrick, and our Team President Derek Hall, who I'm pinch hitting for, to use a baseball term, to allow me to be here, because I'm on the other side of this table as well, too. So thank you for that. An ellipsis, not a period. I wrote that down. Lasting and impactful change. I'm feeling it. I'm feeling the chills right now, and I want to be grateful and say thank you. I wasn't here when Cap took a knee. I was working for an NBA team at the time. It was a deeply impactful time in sport, as a sports fan and as an executive at the time, not at the D-backs, but somewhere else. I felt like we understood what it was, but we moved past it. He was vilified. I never understood why. I grew up a 49ers fan, so I was equally upset, probably more upset than a lot of people that didn't like the team. Knew a little bit about Colin's background, where he grew up, not too far from my own hometown. That was tough. Turn the tables to today, where it seems like we're all getting it, not just sport fans, but people that understand the realities of racism, the realities of systematic stuff going on historically, 400 plus years. I feel the momentum, and it feels a lot better today than it did then. At the D-backs, we know this is a deep, meaningful individual decision whether to stand or to kneel. We're not going to direct that from an organizational directive to our players or our employees. But I'll leave with this. Something really cool happened when we opened opening day 2, I guess. We didn't have one. We opening day 2 recently with no fans. If you're watching on television, our team, along with a few other teams, I don't know if all 30 teams did this for their openers, but there was this ginormous black ribbon that the players held in unison. And our players got down on a knee with that ribbon. And there was a video that was put together by some very courageous black Major League Baseball players, big leaguers, and they got real. And they got real with their movement. And that video was shown at all 30 ballparks on opening day. Proud of our D-backs for getting down on one knee and holding that ribbon. Now, not everyone did. Not every single player did. And we're not going to judge or penalize the ones that didn't. And they collectively stood for the national anthem. They made that decision together to respect our country as well. So a lot went into that kneeling that day, kneeling and standing. But it was powerful, and we hope to continue, and there'll be other questions addressing what our players are doing for this cause.
Joe, just quickly, I'd like to follow up on something that you said. You said that when Kaepernick was being vilified, you didn't understand why. Do you understand now why he was vilified?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I understand now why, because I've made a commitment as the leader of people and culture and a career in this teaching and development of employees. I'm on my own learning journey as well, and now I really understand why, and I've got the energy to help others understand why.
Can you express the reasons why, from your perspective?
Pardon me?
Can you share with us some of the reasons why, from your perspective?
Why he was vilified?
Yes, sir.
Lack of knowledge, going back to maybe how people grew up, not understanding the issues that are going on in the black and brown communities in our country, in the world. And I think now that people do, now that we're talking about it and doing something with it, people are more understanding now than they were then. I think then he was a guy that was this great athlete, and he was pissing people off by kneeling during our country's anthem. He was offending our heroes, our women and men that fought for freedom. But that was surface level at the time. It wasn't a deep thought.
Thank you. Ray, I have a bone to pick with you first, because your coach used to come on my radio show every week, and we enjoyed having Herman on all the time. And then you hired him, and now you can't come on my show anymore. So we'll discuss that later.
You're not one of our sponsors? Is that what you're saying? Good to have you, LC.
It's good to see you too, sir. Same question, but it's unique for you because you're working with student athletes. How has the perspective of Kaepernick on campus been 4 years ago, and where is it today?
Well, let me start by saying, for me, this conversation is not at all uncomfortable. It is welcomed and well overdue. long overdue. At Arizona State, we considered ourselves in higher education, so we sometimes would describe ourselves as a knowledge enterprise. So for us, we got 18 to 22-year-olds who, through the combination of academics, life experiences, and hopefully elite athletics, were in the leadership development business. So when the Kaepernick thing originally happened, for us it was like, okay, this is a real opportunity to really make sure our student athletes understood what was going on. We happen to have, very frankly, by design and intentionally, the most diverse senior administration in all of Division I athletics. So there are a number of leaders in our department who look like me, who understood what Kaepernick was doing. And so we instantly made sure that we got our coaches, our administrators, most importantly, all of our students together and had real significant discussions about what was going on and encouraged them to have a voice, but just make sure it was measured, it was articulate, that you were thinking through the unintended consequences of whatever action you wanted to take. By law and policy in Arizona, as athletic administrators, we could neither encourage nor discourage whatever they wanted to do vis-a-vis the anthem. But we educated them and had dialogue about making intelligent decisions because this is a real learning opportunity. So for us, we were inspired by what he did because, frankly, we understood what he was doing. And to be honest, part of the confusion was that not always the way he went about his messaging was as well articulated as we would have liked, and therefore there was some interpretation that allowed folks to say, well, he's doing this, he's doing that, and they confused what he was really doing. We had a wonderful opportunity with our students to have education opportunities about that. Fast forward to now, our student athletes are very, very supportive. They know what this is. They are stepping forward, as you indicated, or certainly Mr. Gates, I think, articulated some of the things that our student athletes are doing affirmatively to have a voice on these very important issues, to understand that it's a movement, not a moment, as you've heard them say. The education that, you know what, you are either racist or anti-racist. Can't sit on the sideline and be a bystander anymore. And so this whole thing has been really a great opportunity. Kaepernick will, in the minds of our student athletes, be perceived, as you may have mentioned, or one of the speakers, like Ali and Tommy and others who stepped up there and really put it on the line and were misunderstood by a number, but understood by enough whereby our hope is that this is really a movement that will be sustainable and our student athletes will absolutely have a voice. And oh, by the way, the national voice for student athletes now, men and women across the nation, it's real, it's sustainable, it's not going away. And we've got to be ready for it going forward as part of the NCAA, and I think it's a wonderful opportunity for change and progress and growth in making this country better.
Thank you. It's not unusual to see student athletes behave as students on campus and get involved, but I'm curious as to the rest of the panel. Have you had individual athletes of your organizations also get involved in this way, perhaps in a separate way that's organized by the team, but just personally get involved? That's open to any of you.
Well, we've had, going back for years, we've had a group of players that I've met with personally, and we started working on criminal justice issues back in 2017. It was not long after Colin took the knee, and we started talking and having some really honest conversations about what are the things that we can be doing right here in Arizona. And so those conversations have continued, and then obviously this year, and I think this year, Dr. Clovis, when you think about the history, and certainly in my lifetime, 1968 was a huge year for civil rights, but I think when you look at the history books, 2020 is going to be equally big, and sports is going to lead the awareness around those issues. And so we've had a number of players off doing their own thing. We've done things that are organized, and we're planning a lot of things from an organizational standpoint that we'll be doing with our players as we formulate the plans for what we can do. And I think Arizona is the right place, and I think Arizona can be a model for the rest of the United States for change. This is a state that is dynamic. We've got some great leadership. Many of them are here today, and I feel like this is a place where we can really start change and really make things happen. I will say one thing that I'm really proud of is the National Football League. I think you're going to see it when we kick off here in a couple of days. The volume of promotion that's going to be around registering to vote. And I know the other leagues are doing the same thing, but when you look at our ratings, there's no doubt that we're going to make sure that we've really got that message out there. And then it'll shift as early voting starts around the country to getting out the vote and making sure people actually fill out their ballots. What I've encouraged everybody is a lot of times there's a tension on those top of the ticket, you know, presidential, U.S. Senate, maybe the governors and things. But if you look at the police issues, they're municipal. So it's really important that people understand, Mayor Lane, I think you'd agree, that they understand who they're voting for the municipality they live in, because that's who employs the police departments. And then further than that, down where it's the school districts. A lot of times people want to say, well, the governor's in charge or the legislature's in charge of the school district. That's not the case. It's a 5-person board that people have got to get educated about to make sure that those school districts are performing for all of our kids the best they can. So for me, I think this is part of what are we doing from here forward? How can we work together? How can sports really shine a light on some of the change that needs to happen where there is systemic racism and where we can make change?
LZ, I'd like to interject in this way. So, you know, I've admitted to a lot of folks that I'm new to hockey as much as I am to this role. But I got to tell you, my perception of hockey now that I'm in this role has completely changed in terms, and it makes me hopeful, rather, right? So in this last season, the number of players, NHL players, that have said, this is an important conversation for me to be involved in, that this is a time for us to be engaged and to lead in ways that I have never seen hockey players do before. And it's not just, you know, the leadership. It's not just Commissioner Bettman. It's not just the league office. It's the stars of the league saying, we're going to help lead a discussion that, truth be told, we've never had as a league. And so when you talk about creating change, that is massive change. When you have, again, people who have been not just disengaged, but have felt themselves unaffected, right, to all of a sudden get into the fight, to all of a sudden say, I need to educate myself, and I'm not going to sit on the sidelines. Second, how does that translate to our organization? It's already been announced that Gila River Arena is going to be a polling station, right? In an area, quite frankly, that has incredible amount of diversity of this community. I think that's incredibly powerful. But to me, what's the most powerful part was that idea emanated from my staff, from the team members. It didn't come from the top down. It came from people who said, this is what we want to care about, what we want to do, and we're glad that the organization has given us a platform to do so. And so I think when you're talking about actual action and change, it's those conversations, it's those actions that really, really make me very hopeful about how this, again, is a movement. It's not a moment.
Jason, before you respond, I just want a quick follow with you, because I've heard this repeated a couple times now so far, which is using sports arenas as polling places, which is very admirable. But my question to the panel in relationship to that is, why is it necessary?
I think it's because of COVID and because of the social distancing right now. We've been in discussions with the Secretary of State about using State Farm Stadium as a polling place, and we're able to spread out because of the massive amount of space, and particularly for voters that may feel vulnerable to the COVID, this is going to give them a comfort level where they could come in and make sure there's plenty of social distancing. There's not going to be crowding And so a lot of these details are really around the pandemic that's happening right now.
I very much agree with that. There's two pieces. The other is the voter education component of it, because there's showing up to vote and having a location where you can come vote, but not understanding the mechanisms of voting, not understanding how to get yourself registered, not understanding how to familiarize yourself with the process. That's the other component of it that I know many organizations, including ours, are working hard to have an impact on. The other piece, relative to the employee base, I think that's something that is very important to not have lost. Certainly the athletes and the brands have the largest platforms and are able to garner the most attention. But similar to the Coyotes, hearing from our employee base as to what they want to see from the organization and having us respond to that is something that in my now 13 years with the Suns and with the Mercury, we've never had a social issue where our employee base felt so motivated that they actually came to us as leaders from their own initiative and really said, hey, here are some of the things we would love to see this organization and our organization do. To me, that was a really very much a shining moment of pride, particularly from our younger people, to see them out marching, to see them out getting involved. We're going to be utilizing their time and effort to help drive voter turnout and actually allowing them and paying for them to go work at the polls on the voting day. One of the issues I know that many communities are facing is that polling workers tend to be older people, and obviously with the heightened risk of COVID, there's going to be somewhat of a shortage of poll workers. So the ability to have our employees go out and fill that gap is something that we're excited about, and something that our employee base is very much excited about.
And as far as having any athletes in particular use their platforms in terms of this conversation?
They certainly have. Devin Booker's been heavily involved in it, Diana Taurasi, and also our coach and our GM. We're one of very few professional sports teams to have both our general manager and our head coach Black, and we're very proud of that and the impact that they've been able to provide and the perspective they've been able to provide to both our Black employees in terms of a connection and being able to be an additional outlet for their concerns, and then also to educate our other employees has been something that's really allowed, I think, our organization to come together on these issues.
Judy?
I think obviously we've talked about Bubba Wallace and the great work that he's doing, but we've seen our athletes come together and use their own social platforms to call for change. And whether it's Ty Dillon, who had a very insightful conversation on Instagram Live with Bubba Wallace about racism and how to create change in our communities, to drivers like Jimmy Johnson and Ryan Blaney and Tyler Reddick and so many more that use their social posts to, again, call for that change. And I think we saw a video several months ago that our drivers came together and put together, standing up, calling for change, that was broadcast on national television. So we've seen that support from not just Bubba, but from all of the drivers in NASCAR.
So, not unlike my colleagues up here, the D-backs have been very active in the different segments. So players, for sure, using their social media channels, players such as John Jay, John Duplantier, Archie Bradley, while we had him before we traded him, very vocal. Now he's doing his thing in Cincinnati. In addition to that, think about the general manager, Mike Hazen, and what he did with his GM colleagues on draft day, putting together hard dollars and funding for Black Lives Matter and United for Change as they're going through this virtual draft on television, talking about it continuously and why it's important. But going back to another comment from the panel, the employee side, so 325-ish full-time employees, another 500 game day staff here at the D-backs. Eric Hall recently launched a movement called D-backs for Change. And under this movement, he put in charge Nona Lee, our chief legal officer, who is a big voice for change in this market, has been been the head of legal for the D-backs prior to coming over from the Suns for many, many years. Well-known woman, very, very respected, very passionate about all this. And so we put that together a couple months ago. We've got 9 what we call TPRGs, Team Player Resource Groups. You may hear of these as employee resource groups or business resource groups, covering everything from black professionals to LGBTQ+, to employees with disabilities, to allies. And all these individual affinity groups, they're employee-led. And so the ideas are going to come through these 9 different channels and more as they grow, to the leadership, to the organization, to ownership, to move this along. So my point is that it's players, yes, it's executive leaderships, yes, but it's also the largest part of the employment base. And these are our team players, we call. We don't say employee, we say team player at the D-backs for a reason. And so having this rising tide, this movement, to push this, almost to where there's no one that can't be involved, we're all doing this together, is really, really encouraging. And so I don't want to minimize the question on players. They're very powerful for obvious reasons, and they are out there using their channels and their radio shows and television shows to get after this. But I would say at our organization, like many up here, we're all in this together, and it's proven itself out.
Clearly, student athletes have been using their social media posts for a variety of efforts in this conversation. So my question for you, Ray, actually turns more towards the men charged with leading. You've mentioned earlier today that you have the most diverse leadership group in Division I, which clearly was intentional. But when you hear about incidents that have happened in Oklahoma State, when you hear what happened in Florida, when you hear at Clemson about a white assistant coach using the N-word in practice and not being punished in a way that was, let's just say, reparable or consistent with the crime, if you will, what do you think professional athletes can do to help your student athletes create a through line of that change?
Well, if you're talking about professional athletes reaching down and helping collegiate athletes,
Yes, sir.
If there's a real relationship and maybe they've gone to the same school and they spent some time and they know that team, that culture, perhaps they can collaborate with that existing undergraduate player and actually talk about and address the folks in power to make change. I don't know if they are able to do that or not at Clemson. Certainly we would hope that if any of those occurrences happened at our place, that we would do the right thing with regard to the action and the accountability. I can't speak for Clemson and what Dan Radakovich and Dabo were doing and feeling and what their alumni pros may have been doing, LZ. So I won't second guess their action. What I'd like to think is that we would handle ours appropriately under the circumstances. I'd like to think that the culture we are developing would not allow those things to occur. And if they did occur, there would be very prompt accountability for all the folks who needed to be held accountable. I don't mean to dance around your question, but I can't speak for them. Our culture, I think, would handle it hopefully differently and more positively.
We all are hearing very positive statements in terms of your involvement in the community, a desire to want to do things to change. But if everyone felt the same way, we wouldn't be in this place where we are today. So my question is, what has been the pushback on some of the things that you have been involved with, whether it's posting statements or things like saying Black Lives Matter during the broadcast? What are some of the pushbacks that you've heard and received, and how do you deal with it?
Internally or externally?
Why don't we do both, since you brought it up, Jason?
I'd say internally, very little. It's been the opposite. It's been the thankfulness that we've taken the positions we've taken. Externally, look, I said it a little bit earlier. You have when you're talking about issues that cut to the heart of our society, and people have strong feelings about one way or the other, you're going to get some people who are upset with you. And so we have had incoming emails, some of which to the point where when you read them, you can't even believe that somebody would put these kind of things on paper or electronically. We've gotten phone calls from some partners. And look, at the end of the day, if you're going to take a position, you have to be willing to stand by that position and understand going into it that there could be financial consequences. At the same time, we've had many partners and many fans reach out to us thanking us for the position that our organizations and that our players and that our employees have taken. So it really does cut both ways. I think at the end of the day, somebody said it a little bit earlier, the concept of sitting by idly and doing nothing is probably the worst position you could be in, and the last thing that our organization would want to do.
You know, some of the pushback we've gotten externally is really interesting. It's been focus on sports. Sports is my escape. Sports is the place where I don't want to talk about all the things that I have to deal with in the outside world. And there's been financial consequences for that. You know, there's been individuals and companies that have decided not to renew season tickets or suites or what have you. And yet, that's just not who we are. That's not our ethos as an organization. We are a community asset. And as such, we need to be engaged in our community. It's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do by the people who work with us. And it's the right thing to do by the people who support us. Right? And that's just how we're going to do that. But that's been the one that's been the most interesting pushback of, let's just have you play sports. The just shut up and dribble concept, right? And that's just not who we are. That's not what we're going to do. And we've made that very clear.
I think for us, LZ, you mentioned earlier, we banned the Confederate flag. And we heard from some of our fans that they were not, they didn't really like that. But our message to them isn't that we're pushing anyone out of our sport. Instead, like I said earlier, we want to create something that's welcoming for everyone. And we've seen a lot of positive response, and we've opened new doors, like I mentioned. So very similar to what the group up here is saying is there are the naysayers, but we've also seen a lot of people stand up alongside of us as well and support doing what's right.
Yeah, our identical to what has been described up and down, but I also think when you look at external, I think sports can really lead here. And you see it happening, I see it happening in corporate Arizona, and I think it's probably happening in corporate America and maybe international. And, excuse me, I am part of the largest CEO group in Arizona, and it's called Greater Phoenix Leadership. We focus on statewide issues, 120 CEOs. And what we've decided to do, I'm actually the chairman of it, is add a racial equity advancement role for an executive within the organization so that when we're looking at policy issues, that we can now start looking at these through the lens of, does this impact communities? Does this impact people in ways that we don't intend? And how can we take policy positions that are more thoughtful and equal and have equity for everyone? So that's something that I'm pretty proud of what we're doing with our business civic group. And I know in the discussions I've had with CEOs around the board table, there are a lot of ideas that are going back to Arizona businesses that are very similar, where we're really starting to see the ripple effect. And, you know, our players started it, CAP started it, others have started it. And when you look at 2020, again, I go back, I think this is going to be an important year in terms of advancement of equality in America.
LZ, I can tell you from our perspective that we're getting some very interesting responses to what our student athletes are doing in terms of the social justice movement and what we as a public university and athletic department are essentially allowing them to do. And so it ranges from folks who are irate saying, you know, you're a public university, you got taxpayer dollars, how dare you appear to take a position? How dare you allow Caleb Christopher's fists with the pitchfork be displayed on your video board on Juneteenth weekend? We disagree with that. And so, like my professional colleagues, threats of I'm not going to renew my tickets, I'm going to stop donating, I'm not going to let my kids come to your camps anymore, et cetera, et cetera. And then some of the personal messages that I get, Jason, I assure you, are not for print. People get very courageous when they can hide behind that shield of not putting their name on their text or what have you. I get plenty of those. But what we are seeing is an opportunity to essentially then tell our development people, tell our ticketing folks, that you can respond in a professional, courteous way, that you have a decision to make, because we're not going to be impeded in our advancement in what we're doing, and you can either stay with us or it's your prerogative to make the other decision. But it's been pretty interesting, because I know a lot of my athletic director colleagues across the country, depending on where they're located, are under tremendous pressure. And how do you respond to those types of, very frankly, I'm going to take my money and go elsewhere, threats or acknowledgments or whatever you want to call it, depending on where you're from. But that's been very interesting and challenging.
How do you navigate that? And this is a question for all of you, but I will start with Julie, because unfortunately, NASCAR has been so synonymous with the Confederate flag for so many people that it's hard for them to separate what that flag represents to the way that it's reflected in the sport. In other words, it's a flag of treason and racism, and you're flying it in your sport. People may feel a certain kind of way about going there, and your industry in particular has had to try to find a way to continue to be financially viable, while also recognizing what you're doing to be viable. How tricky is that, trying to please these two audiences?
I think it goes back to, again, we're not trying to push anybody out of our sport. You do have a choice, and yes, we all want to be, we need to be financially viable, but at the end of the day, there's no place for that in our sport, and we've been very clear with that. There's no place for racism, there's no place for hatred. And it goes back to what the team's been saying up here. You have a choice. And while we would love to continue to have everybody back at our racetracks and enjoying our races, you do have a choice, and we respect that. But we're going to continue to move forward. We're going to continue to do the work. We're listening. We're working on so many different things as we move forward, and supporting our athletes, supporting Bubba Wallace and everybody else for what they're doing. So for us, yes, it's a balance, but it's also, at the end of the day, we made it clear that there's no place for that in our sport.
Well, Michael, obviously the NFL has been a hotbed for this discussion point as well when it comes to Kaepernick. How tricky was it for you and the other owners to try to find that middle ground, if you will, in which you don't lose so much revenue that it hurts you, but still trying to send a message that you feel is important?
Well, I think, the way we looked at this a few years back, we obviously created this owner-player social justice committee. I serve on it, and I'm honored to do that. And we had spent about $50 million prior to 2020 in terms of spending on social justice issues around the country. And so we've been working on a lot of different things because it's the right thing to do. We're listening to our staff, our coaches, our players, and what is important to them. And I think when you look at what we're going to be doing going forward, I think it's important to take a long view of these things. There may be some people that don't agree with some of the things that sports is standing up for, but it's time. It's time for change, and we all recognize that, and it's time for people not of color to stand up and talk about this and talk openly about this and lead on this, and that's what is needed. And our players have said, they want us to lead, which I'm happy that they're, we can work together on this, and we've been doing it for years. And this isn't something that's new to me. Dr. Stewart and my father worked together to get the Martin Luther King holiday passed here 30 years ago. And so this is something that we're going to continue to work on. And it seems like my perception is America, they're waking up to these issues. And certainly after everybody saw the George Floyd video, there are a lot of people that said enough is enough, and we need to really address these things. And so that's something that's been very important to us, and we're going to continue to do it. And all the owners have made a further commitment of another $250 million that we're going to be spending over the next 10 years in our marketplaces that collectively that will work on social change in our own backyard. And so that's where I think I'm really excited, because we can do a lot of things in a lot of spaces here in Arizona that hopefully will be a model for the rest of the United States.
Xavier, how do we take this moment, if you will, and make it sustainable? I'm old enough to remember panels of this nature shortly after the Rodney King beating video. And we all saw the video, we were all shocked, and we all said, never again. And yet, here we are. So how do we sustain that through sports?
So I'll point out two things, and something that Dr. Chavis said and something that Michael said. First, corporate America is embracing this in a way that you've never seen before, right? Seeing investment firms talking about this is an important factor into where we're going to put capital. That speaks volumes as to what people's mindset is about the importance of these issues and their involvement in those issues. Never before did you ever see people saying, not only am I going to take a position, I need to take a position. This is the right thing to do for my business. And so I think that's an incredibly powerful difference than in the early 90s. The second, and I'm in this unique situation, and I'm going to make a statement that a lot of people are going to say, what? The youth market in America, the youth hockey market in Arizona is driving our sport. This is one of the fastest growing youth hockey markets in America. And the youth are embracing these issues in a way that they're unabashed about it. They're saying this is just how you're supposed to treat people. This is how you're supposed to go about your life. And so I'm very hopeful that as a result, when you marry that, business enterprises are understanding the importance of this. I've often say part of my business plan is I'm going to go where the puck is going, right? And where's the puck going in America? It's going to the female cohort, it's going to the youth cohort, and to the multicultural cohort, right? Part of my goal in the youth hockey market is to make sure that, young people of color, Latinos, African American, the LGBTQ community, that I'm reaching to them so that their growth is as equally high and fast as other youth markets, right? So in my opinion, how do we have any hope that we're not going to be sitting here 20 years from now having this same conversation? I look to young people, and I actually look to the business leaders who are saying, this moment is different, this is actual movement, and we're going to put our money where our mouth is behind it.
But Joe, you represent the sport that integrated baseball. In your perspective, how do we, as a sports community, keep this momentum going so that it doesn't fade away like other moments in the past?
It's a great question, and I think it has to happen every day. And maybe the metric isn't day, but we can't let time go by. We can't check the box and say, hey, we got a committee, we have these resource groups and whatnot. We have to push. And so for me and the employees I talk to all day long now on video, hopefully back at Chase Field soon, it's got to be a priority. It's got to be on the list, and we have to do it every day. We can't do it once a week. We can't do it when we're told to do it because it's in your review or whatever it might be. Relentless is the word I use. We have to be relentless about this, or it will go away. I mean, that's the real risk. If we're not relentless, it's going to stop. It's going to be that period and not that ellipsis, to say what I said earlier. And so there's a lot of push to this every single day.
Jason, you turn on the television, watch a playoff game, it says Black Lives Matter right there in the court. You see the back of the jerseys, but then we hear a report that maybe upwards of 80% of NBA players were not registered to vote, which, in my perspective, seems a little self-defeatist. How important is it for teams to be actively engaged with their athletes, as well as the other members of their organization, in terms of educating them on the issues at hand, as well as small things like making sure you're registered to vote?
Right. I think as every league does this, they have player development programs, player education programs. For us, it's called the Business of Basketball, and it's a program where players coming into the league are given exposure to a variety of different topics. And I think as we move forward here, as these topics are particularly important to the generation of athletes coming up now, we need to integrate, and we are integrating those types of subject matters into these trainings for our athletes, because ultimately, if they say that they're interested in pursuing a particular social justice cause but don't really do the things that you need to do to move the needle on it, they're going to get frustrated as well. And so I do think it's important that the teams take an active role in that. If you have the right leadership in your basketball operations, your team operations side, your coaching staff, your general manager, and then on your executive and ownership side as well, all behind those types of initiatives, I think that can be helpful. Ultimately, these are still young kids a lot of times and in need of guidance, and they want to do things but don't necessarily know how to do it. And that's not unique, I wouldn't say, to a professional athlete. You take any 21, 22, 23-year-old, and they have ideas and concepts of the things they want to achieve, but aren't necessarily skilled yet enough in life to know how to get there. And I think it's up to leaders within these organizations to help provide that path.
I agree with that, but I've had these conversations, actually led the training with our staff. I let Coach lead it with our players and the football staff. And we had an online registration there where, even from other states, we engaged an organization that helped us get our players registered all around the United States if they weren't allowed to register here in Arizona. But it's just so important that it not just come from the top down. I challenged our players that were frustrated that some of their teammates said, well, it doesn't matter, my vote's not going to count. I said, you got to go back and make sure all these guys are registered. So we've got them forms, and it's going to be on our players to help put the peer pressure to make sure everyone's engaged and that their families are registered, and that we just not take that step, but it's turning out the vote, including early voting, which I believe most of our players are going to be doing, rather than showing up on Election Day.
Ray, is this part of the orientation process for student athletes?
We have a very robust orientation program, and someone mentioned voter education and registration. This movement allowed a very student-led uptick in voter education and registration, and then the Pac-12 conference, amongst all the institutions, essentially put out what amounted to a challenge, if you will. We didn't formally do that, but to see if every student athlete, every single student athlete across the sports would get registered and do it early, because you have a lot of out-of-state kids who need to be able to vote by mail. So words in action, you hear Coach Herm say that all the time, put your action to the words. So voter education and registration was one that across the board, the landscape of the NCAA, a lot of folks are doing that very timely. So that's a real action piece, as well as an ongoing organized way of students getting together with administrators or coaches or personnel and talking through these issues on a more regular basis so that the education and sensitivity will continue.
As I said earlier, you mentioned that you have the most diverse leadership in Division I. Clearly was intentional. My questions for the rest of the panel, what is your organization's perspective or approach to diversity and inclusion, as well as talent development and retention?
We've been doing this for decades, and it's just it's diversity. That my grandmother was the first female owner of an NFL team, and she ran the team for 15 years. After my grandfather passed, she decided to keep it and run it. In the 1970s, my father was the first NFL owner to hire a female front office African-American woman to an executive role. He hired the first African-American contract negotiator. We had the first African-American GM and head coach in National Football League history. It's something we put a big emphasis on. One of the areas that I serve on is the NFL's Diversity and Inclusion Committee, is we're really putting a focus on building a pipeline for head coach candidates, which come up through quarterback coaches and through offensive coordinators. So we really focus on creating opportunities for African-American coaches to get exposure into that quarterback room and create a pipeline. So we've established the Bill Bidwell Fellowship that now all 32 teams have adopted that fellowship concept to bring minorities into the quarterback room and create a pipeline for future hiring. And then, frankly, I talked a few minutes ago about the financial commitment that all 32 teams have made of $250 million over the next 10 years to invest back into social change. I think we're doing a lot. I know all the teams are going to be doing a lot, especially around the 2020 register to vote and turning out the vote. So it's important to us. I think it's part of our ethos. I believe it was Jason or maybe Xavier that talked about the importance to our younger fans. Our younger fans and our younger employees want the organization to be thoughtful, to be socially conscious, to be at the cutting edge of things. And so it's not just a fan and a business issue, it's also an employment issue. And I would imagine we'll see a few heads nod down the line that your employees, not just your current employees, but your future employees, want to see your organization, whether it's a sports organization or not. I think business in general, that's what customers want, the younger customers. Every business and every CEO and every marketing executive in the United States is looking for that young future customer that will remain a generational customer for them, and that's an important part of the way the youth in America are thinking today.
Yeah. So obviously diversity and inclusion is not just important for us as an organization, but it's important for me personally. This is a personal matter of helping to open doors and to bring diverse voices to the table of decision-making authority. That's what we need to see. I'm very proud of the fact that as we have made changes in our leadership group, that we have been very, very focused, and it's proactive. It's a proactive approach to find diverse talent, to put them in decision-making positions within the organization. But in addition, and this goes back again relating to my career in investment, we are very large business enterprises. The impact that we have on economies is massive. And so as a result, we need to see ourselves, and we do, and I give a lot of credit to every organization up here, but to make the effort to partner and create economic opportunity with diverse businesses and diverse talent across the communities. When you think about who our service providers are, who our vendors are, who we do business with, the economic opportunity that we can create is massive. And I really, really applaud everybody up here for seeing it that way, and you're now being more outspoken in articulating that. So it's just not retention, it's not support, it's not promotion, but it's also who are we doing business with, and how can we create economic empowerment through our dollars as business enterprises.
The economic empowerment part is, I think, is crucial. The league, many of you probably heard the NBA about 2 weeks ago now announced the creation of a new foundation, $300 million over a 10-year period, basically $1 million per team for 10 years. And the primary crux of that, and is done in partnership with the Players Association, which I think is a testament to how the owners and the league and the players have come together on these issues. But the primary crux of the foundation is to create mechanisms for black economic empowerment, starting everything from the educational process through college, mentorship programs, funding of businesses and so forth. But that type of a commitment across the league, I think, is a meaningful starting point. The key is the execution of it. And there's still a lot of work to be done, and there's still a lot of things to figure out, but the first step is obviously making that commitment.
And to follow along those same lines, a lot of the things that have been shared already are things we've been working on, and we've actually had a program in place for about, since 2004, called the Drive for Diversity. That's something that helps people with diverse backgrounds, women, find roles in our sport. And that can be anything from drivers to crew members to people that want to work on the business side of our sport. For example, Bubba Wallace, we've talked a lot about Bubba. He came through that program. Daniel Suarez is another one that was part of that. We actually had 2 female alumni last year go over the wall for a pit crew in the 2019 Daytona 500. So it's programs like that we need to do more with and do more things just to make sure everybody knows about it and do more and place people in these opportunities as we move forward. So just continuing to do more of that along with everything that the group up here has said is a huge initiative for us.
So great inputs from the panel. Again, the D-backs, we operate in a similar measure. We are deeply committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion, always have been. We've formalized that with a DE&I committee led by Nona Lee, who I mentioned earlier. But if you get down to tactics, they're important. So what are we doing about raises and promotions? We have a compensation committee that looks at the data, up, down, sideways, any way we can to make sure we're being fair when it comes to raises. We have a leadership academy that I teach in. It's approximately 30 weeks a year. We make sure that the 28 team players in that academy, which we have this year, we have a session coming up Thursday, it's half women, and a great portion of our minority up-and-coming talents are in that academy. We do everything from assessment to have guest speakers, some from ASU, as I mentioned earlier, which is cool. So it's not just hunting and searching in the talent acquisition part, which is important for diverse candidates. What are you doing with these talents when they're there in the house, right? I think a lot of people stop and say, all right, well, our pie chart looks good. Let's move forward. But it's about promoting. It's about getting these diverse talents into better positions. And if there's not one here at the D-backs, we're going to advocate for them elsewhere. If there's someone in the way that's just not moving, we have long tenures across the board. I'll get on the phone and talk to someone in Miami or Detroit or Los Angeles to help this diverse go to the next step. It's the right thing to do, and I spend a lot of that, as does Derek. So we are fired up about it, and we'll continue to push the DE&I buttons as often as we can.
All right, do you have anything to add?
We want the best talent, but we're going to be really broad-minded about what that means. And if there's an opportunity to advance diversity and inclusion, we will be intentional about it. We've not made that at all a secret from the day I walked in.
I want to thank our panelists for their wisdom, their insight, their time, and their commitment to being anti-racist and not just standing on the sidelines. I just want to conclude with a phrase that a friend of mine always says, and it always resonates in these moments. I know many of you know Neil Giuliano, who's sitting over there in the corner. he always says it's important that we change hearts and minds. And I've always taken that phrase of his to heart because it's truly, truly is important that we don't just rely upon interacting with each other from on high with money and bills and legislation and rallies, but interpersonally as well. That's where we really begin to see change in our hearts, when we're able to treat each other with respect on an interpersonal level. So I would like to leave you with that. It's easy to say Black Lives Matter when you have like-minded individuals. The true struggle is being able to say it when you're in enemy territory, where everyone won't agree with you. That's where you truly will find movement in this conversation. I want to thank you all for your time again. Panelists, thank you.
LZ, we can't thank you enough. Flew in town just to be here for this session. Thank you so much. Also want to thank our special guest, Pastor Stewart, for the invocation, keynote special speakers, and Neil Giuliano. Thank you so much for the support and helping us out to pull everything together today. Dr. Chavis, you've been moderating in and out of town for us. Thank you so much for coming in during the pandemic in the last couple of months with being with us. And I also want to congratulate you on your new weekly show, the Chavis Chronicles. So good luck with your new show. Listen, another big round of applause for our moderator, for our keynote, for our special speakers, and our panelists. Let's give them a round of applause. So before we bring up AP for closing remarks, we want to respectfully ask our panelists right after his closing remarks to get your mask on. We'd like to get a group photo, so we want to get your mask on and have you get a little bit tight so our photographer can get a group photo before you leave. Also want to like to get have our audience members give them a moment. I know some of you want to kind of catch up and grab them before they leave. Just give them a moment to get the photo in, and we'd appreciate that. All of you in the audience, our production team, want you to take a moment to share your thoughts and feedback about today's panel session. They will have a couple of questions for you. Just give us your feedback. So now, moving forward to our closing remarks, I am honored to bring to the podium the man that makes it happen, Mr. Alan A.P. Powell. If you know him, you know he'd rather do it than talk about it. He's a national strategist, a military veteran who served in the United States Army during the Gulf War under Operation Desert Storm. He is the chairman and CEO of AP and Associates, LLC. AP has been highly recognized for his community service with numerous awards and accolades, too many to mention. But AP will tell you that really none of that matters. What matters is what we do. He's a true servant leader. With Aaron Bear, they co-founded the Arizona Foundation, which is why we're here having this discussion today. Here's the vision behind today's forum. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Alan A.P. Powell.
Just want to thank everybody for taking your time to come today. This is a very important conversation to me. I'm from Louisville, Kentucky, grew up in the inner city. I've seen all these things happening when I was a kid, and I've seen it happen when I'm an adult. I really, really appreciate everybody's time today. I know you could be doing a lot of other things. Mr. Bidwell's got to kick off for his season. He's here with us. It's really important that you really care. As a former prosecutor, you've seen both sides of the street. So we really appreciate your time along with the other panelists. One of the things I do want to say is we have about 15 police chiefs in here. That's saying something, that this really matters. We have mayors. I even got my good friend Mayor Nichols drove all the way down from Yuma to come down with us today. So I know what we're doing matters. Jack Sellers has got perfect attendance since he found out about the bridge forum. He's staying on our page. I even can see my good friend Joe LeDuc, who's another perfect attendance, except when Chief Rob Bell didn't tell him. So he's here with us today. But I do want to say to everybody, we have these panelists up here, but one of the things that I think that we could take from this, and me and Pastor Stewart, we've been talking about this with the black clergy, just about 100 of 100 of our ministers in the state of Arizona. How do we stay connected to this panel? I'm glad that it took the time to come up, but you have all these programs that we don't have access to, all this information, and we would love to create some kind of body to align ourselves with you all so we can do some good work together. I mean, I serve a community called 854 which is Carlos's district, and that community leads in every statistic in Arizona except for suicide. So we got a lot of work to do, but we can do it together. I look at Ms. Armani Jackson. You know, it's funny you hear young people say, we want to sit at the table. Ever since I told her about what we were doing, she's been in attendance. She's stepped up, and one of the funny things is, tell you a quick story is, Mary Lane and Chief Rod Bell and I was sitting down one day, and I was in Mary Lane's office, and I didn't know Armani. And Chief Rod Bell's like, you know, we got to find a meeting place. We're waiting on the phone call. And I'm like, who is this? So here's this 22-year-old young lady. Got the police chief and the mayor don't know where the next meeting's at, where we going. All they know is they're waiting on the phone call. And she was controlling, and she actually, like Chief Rod Bell said, she did everything she said she was going to do. She was in a peaceful protest. They cleaned up when they left. But this young lady organized probably about 25,000 people at 22 years old over the period of time. Now, I don't know how they did it in your days, Dr. Chase, with 25,000. But I do want to tell everybody I really appreciate you. Once again, God bless you, and God continue to bless the United States of America.
Thank you, Mr. Powell, again for your vision and your leadership. Again, that's why we're here today. So this concludes our program. Again, if you can give our panelists a moment, we want to get our keynote speaker up here. LZ, can you come up here on the stage? We want to get a group photo, have our panelists put their mask on. We're going to get a group photo so we don't hold them up from the rest of their day. AP, if you can get up here, and Aaron Bear, where are you, sir? If you could. And Cheryl Pizzone, thank you so much. So let's get this photo here, and then we can move on with our day. Come on. Thanks, LZ. Appreciate it. Thanks, man. Great job. Thank you, man. All right, well, it is. So our photographer, I'll come and help you get them together. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you, Julie.